Gui Carvalhal joins the podcast today to talk to me about leadership. But before I get into the conversation, just a quick introduction on Guy. He is known to be an authentic leader, a culture creator, and a multinational executive that's made an impact to teams across several different regions. He's also a public speaker, and he runs his own podcast and program that shares subject matter expertise from his guests on vital growth topics. I've asked Guy to come on today to talk to me a little bit about his journey, to talk a little bit about what leadership means to him, but also the impact that he's making to a lot of his listeners watching his podcast. Guy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the intro. I'm super excited to see how this conversation is going to go.
Absolutely. Guy, I always love starting off with the early days. You've had a tremendous journey, right? So I know you've started off in a specific country and then you've transitioned and you've had some multinational executive roles, but then you've also transitioned into some significant and impactful leadership positions, carrying some large responsibility. Talk to me about the early days in terms of how that started, and then we'll get into how you've transitioned into where you are today.
Oh, I love it. So actually, I'm going to start a little bit earlier than that because a lot of people, they ask me, so your career is kind of like sometimes confused. Well, that was actually a decision. So at the very beginning of my career, I always decided that I'm going to be a generalist person. So I want to have experience in sales, marketing, and technical areas, right? And that's why I always went to like from product marketing, then back to sales. I was a technical evangelist as well. So when I started putting this all together, that's when came up the idea of, you know what, now I want to have an international career. So focusing on Microsoft, I started my career in Microsoft Brazil in 2004, 2005. It was an amazing experience. I joined the company as a technical person doing ISV evangelism. It was an amazing, like talking about technology, Microsoft, and why people should develop on Windows and not Linux. That was my first role. And then I moved to marketing, right? I was running a lot of like different programs. And that's when I came to Canada to run marketing for Office 365, starting my international career and also having the sales experience. After that, I jumped to the SMB team, which was like an amazing experience. That's where I got my Founders Award, something I will never forget. And that brought OCP, right? So OCP today, I'm managing the partners we have in Canada, the most strategic partners, basically for those who understand the Microsoft language, the traditional resellers, large resellers, and the distributors across Canada. So that was the fundamental of my career strategy. Again, being a generalist and having this experience. When I think forward, I came from an emerging market, Brazil. I spent my last 7 years in Canada in a major market. Right? It's completely different experience. And my very next step is going to be on a regional headquarter, taking care of like multi-country regions and really understanding different cultures, different economies, and how can we bring the right channel, the right ecosystem of partners to cover this massive business we have in MEA, which is the next role we're going to take.
That's amazing. Well, hey, massive congratulations on the next role. And there's a lot in there just in terms of your background, right? Because I get a sense of that versatility for marketing, for technical and sales, and then obviously covering a massive partner ecosystem and organizations that you're responsible for today. But then in tandem to that, you also displayed during your description there, you also displayed a little bit of a passion and interest in different cultures, in diversity. Like, tell me a little bit about where does that passion come from, in addition to the marketing, the sales, and technical that you described?
I love where you're going because basically what I explained to you was my career plan.
Nice,
If I
nice.
bring to you my personal plan, my life, right, what I want to be at the end of my life as an individual in this world, I always thought about myself, I want to live in 4 or 5 different cultures to really have that real experience of like living the culture, becoming that person, right? Not just going for a vacation or traveling around the globe, but living. And that's why like coming to Canada was the first experience. And now going to this other next step in my career, it's actually bringing this personal accomplishment as well, because this is kind of like my personal goal. But the real question is like, okay, but why that? Because I just love people. And one thing that I always say to everyone, even working for Microsoft and working with technology, at the end of the day, all the technologies we build and we develop, we're building for people. Right? These are the software, the apps, the cloud business, no matter what you're doing, you are doing for someone to sit in front of a computer or a smartphone or a tablet and consume. So with people in mind, and I always say like people centricity is key because this is what we do today. Right? And having this understanding of like different cultures, I think it's going to enrich me a lot, right? To understand different ways of thinking, different ways of prioritizing, right? Because again, it helps us understanding are we doing the right technology for the people we have in different countries across the globe.
So that's incredible, right? I love the fact that you've described your passion for people, but the diversity of adding value and empowering people across different cultures is actually very exciting because you're not like kind of stuck or remaining in one specific zone. You're increasing your overall capability and expanding your overall experience just in terms of the cultural adaptability that you execute upon in all the different regions that you spend time in. Tell me a little bit about leadership, right? Because obviously before this chat, I did a little bit of research on you. Everyone that I talk to always says to me that you're a pretty authentic leader. You also have a natural ability specifically to grow and scale. Like you have a strategic mindset just in terms of how you apply your leadership principles to grow. So I'd love for you to share a little bit with me about what's underneath that and what does leadership mean to you?
Yeah, so let's talk about leadership. For me, leadership will have two sides as well. One is the people side, and the other one is the business. So on the people side, I would say it's really creating the empathy, right? It's giving time for people so they can talk. And I think it's super important for a leader to learn how to listen, right? You need to listen because by the time you listen, you're going to understand that every single person is different from each other.
Right.
I'm super proud that on my team, I have people from like, it's a multicultural team. I have people from Brazil. I'm Brazilian. I have another Brazilian. I have people from Argentina. I have people from Canada, of course. I have people from India. Right? We have people from Pakistan. Right? We have people from UK. So I think this diversity brings us a lot of learnings. Right? We talk about diversity and inclusion, but that's like living diversity and inclusion. So my first leadership principle is listening. The second one as a leader is building the platform for people to be successful. And there is a big difference because I see a lot of leaders giving the platform for people. Giving a platform is different than building a platform for someone. It's basically when you're taking that person with you and you represent that person as your leader in that platform. Giving the space, stepping back and putting that person out in the front so she can learn and grow, right, and become the next leader. The third principle that I always use with my team is I love the coaching idea, right? That's what you have to do as a leader. But I frequently go back to the concept of being the captain of the team. Meaning, when you're always coaching, sometimes it feels that you're uh, driving the business on the sidelines
Mm-hmm.
and your team is playing on the field.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you become captain, sometimes you're playing the game with them. You're still the captain, but now you're inside the game, right? Playing with them, feeling their pain, right? Going through the challenge they're seeing every day. And this is what I think, Rishan, that brings a lot of like empathy between myself and my team because I give them the time, right? So I listen to them, and at the same time, I play the game with them to feel their pain. And I think this is critical for a leader today, right? So the people, when they look at the leaders and the managers they have to feel the confidence. They cannot be afraid of their managers. And this is who I try to be, right? To make sure my team is not afraid of talking to me when they have a personal problem, when they have a business problem. Because at the end of the day, we're here to help them to be successful. Building the right platform for them, coaching them, and being side by side when they need it.
I want to double click on that a little bit, right? Because I feel like a lot of the times, one of the biggest mistakes leaders make is not listening and not creating the space for communication, which is your point number one, right? On point number two, you talk a little bit about building a platform, pretty much creating the space to exercise strengths and exercise skill sets that exist within the team. Like, talk to me a little bit about that. Maybe explain to me the difference between building the platform versus creating the platform or taking over the platform.
And I think it's exactly bringing those two together because every person is different and every person has different goals.
Right.
So if you're giving the time to listen to them, to understand, hey, who you want to be, you're basically just looking at that and the role they have to play today in your organization. But by the time you listen to that, you understand, okay, cool. So you're doing this role today, but your next step is actually going to this direction. How can I help you to build a platform that's going to give you the experience you need and the visibility you need to get there? That's why I call it building the right platform. It's not something that matters to me as a leader, right? The platform has to be something that matters to them.
Mm.
And that's on the manager responsibility to make sure you're able to build that platform. And my experience, Rishan, doing that is that people get so excited because now they see a manager really doing something that matters to themselves.
Mm.
Right? And of course, we're putting aside the accountability in the role. Right? This is like non-negotiable. You have to
Right.
deliver your role really
Right.
well. You're your quota. Go for it. But I think always like discussing the next step and what else you can do. How can you grow in the role? Right? It is amazing, and that's the feedback I get from my team. So every time we build this platform for them, and they feel that the experience of going above the role, they feel so excited, which is one of the principles we have as a leader, generating energy. So I see the energy being generated there. But of course, it comes with listening, like a lot of listening before you build a platform.
So those three things that you described is so well said as well, and I think I'm certain that there has to be that element of consistency to pretty much define growth and success as a leader. I want to take it in a little bit of a different direction because you've been in South America, you've been in North America, and now you headed to EMEA as well, right? So you've transitioned, you've got a lot of versatility just in terms of your consistent approach across people, leadership, impact. What do you think one of the biggest challenges would be for a leader moving from one region to a new region?
It is always the culture.
Yes.
Always the culture, right? People are completely different. And I don't want to name countries because I want to be respectful to everyone. But I live in some countries that people are very aggressive and they're not afraid of telling you what they're thinking. There's actually nothing wrong about that in their culture. It is
Right.
actually something positive because we're being transparent. Some other people, they're much more reserved, right? Because like, hey, I cannot just say whatever I think because in my culture, we have to be super respectful, right, to what we say. We also have, so that is the cultural piece, right? That will help us to understand what are you actually stepping into. So goes back again to the same principle, like creating empathy. And the way you create empathy is giving the time to listen. And that's the best way for you to absorb the culture and how people are different. Because that is the high level, right? The cultural level. And then you get to the individual level. Because even inside the same culture, of course, you have different type of people. One thing that I use all the time, and anyone can search that, is the situational leadership. That's a model that basically explains, how can you look at your people, your team, or any person you're interacting with, and put in four different quadrants. And it's going to help you to understand which ones you really need to spend more time with, and which ones you can just give the guidance and the direction, and they will go by themselves. Why this is super critical and important? Because again, you're respecting the way people like to work. Some people they like the manager next to them and working with them and coaching them, right, and trying together. Some other people, like myself, is more like, hey, this is what I need from you. See you in 6 months, right? And they can go and do everything by themselves. When they need help, they will come to you. So I think it's super important for you to understand as well the different type of person we have.
Situational leadership is so vital just in terms of diversity, transition, and multicultural leadership specifically, right? Let me ask you this similar question, but a little differently. So, of course, leadership person comes into a new country, a new role, leading a team that has been there for an extremely long time, very experienced. How do you win over the team?
Well, how will we know the team? It is doing a lot of research, right, about themselves and listening to them, talking to them. And I love doing both because, of course, people, they always see themselves in a way, and the reality around themselves sometimes is different, right?
Right.
And that's why I think it's important for the leader as well to bring them back to, hey, this is actually what's happening around you. This is what you're super good at. This is what you need to evolve. Because I would say it's really difficult, especially when you get more experience in your career. And that's why, again, I love being a generalist person. Because by the time you become a specialist, it's really hard for you to change, right? To
Yeah.
learn the next thing. And and the world is today all about change. We're talking about digital transformation. We are transforming inside Microsoft. Everybody's becoming more technical. So when you have someone who is resistant on the change, it is important that you are able to coach them. One other thing, and you asked me this, but I didn't answer. Flipping back a little bit, the leadership to the business side,
Yes.
because I think this helps people as well. I have some principles on the business side. And it's funny because by the time I say this, people are like, oh, I'm going to lose my job. No, that's not what's going to happen. One of my principles to scale is how can we do more with less? And success for me is when my team is performing without putting their hands on everything. And the example I use with that all the time is like, but how this is going to happen? By the time you start creating processes and you start creating some type of automation and things start flowing by itself, you actually can go to bed during the night, and by the time you wake up in the morning, your number is growing. And that's what I consider business success, is when you're building something that has some like type of automation and having its own life. And that's why like some people on my team like it means that when everything is ready and working by itself, I'm gonna lose my job. It's like, no, don't worry about that. You're always gonna have your next challenge. Right?
Right.
But this is one of the principles I use to scale the business. Right? Is really trying to have less of my people involved in every single step of the processes or the business we need to drive, because at the end of the day, we become a bottleneck. We need to be major orchestrators, right? Making sure that everything is working as expected. So we call this like building engines. Right? So we have to build engines, sales engines, marketing engines, enablement engines. And you is basically the orchestrator to make sure that all these engines are working together and seamless to accomplish the business goals we need. By the time you start getting into the engine one by one and to that specific detail, you're becoming the bottleneck. Because without you, the engine's not going to work. And that is a major blocker for us. When you bring those two things together, at the end of the day, again, you are empowering people. You're empowering people to lead and not just execute,
Nice.
and thinking more strategic.
I love that you orchestrate and you refer to them as engines, and also earlier on you talked about building platforms to create the space for people to actually make an impact and be effective in their roles, but above and beyond that, grow just in terms of how you understand who they are and where they need to be. Speaking of platforms specifically, tell me a little bit about your own platform.
My role platform?
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
caught by surprise.
oh, sure. So my context, I love this channel, and I created this channel at the beginning of the pandemic when everybody was working from home, and I have like so many contacts across Canada because of the channel I have to manage it. That I decided to create a platform for them to get visibility across Canada. So they caught by surprise. It became a video and podcast version at the same time. There is a website called bysurprise.ca, and then I was putting like Microsoft people. You have Kevin Pisker there. So you have Microsoft people talking about the technologies and the economy, the country, and what's going on with the channel. You have partners also talking about their own solution, what they bring to market, and some success case from a customer. So we started this, and now it's expanding. So I have other people doing interviews as well and leveraging the channel, so we can put more partners there. It happens in a very similar way than you and I are doing here. The idea is to have like a 5 minutes video. It's very quick and short answers. And I always tell them I'm going to edit at the end. So if you're talking too much, like I'm doing here with you now, I'm going to cut you down. So when you really get the essence of the message, to make like a 5 to 7 minutes video.
How's it conceived? Like, what went through your mind when you set it up?
I love the digital space. And I was feeling a little bit like missing the marketing side of this three pillars experience that I like. I love marketing. If you tell me, okay, Key, choose one of those three, I would choose marketing. Because I really believe that doing the right marketing, you drive sales. And
Right.
you cannot do a good marketing without knowing the technology you're trying to sell. And that's why like I was missing doing a little bit of like marketing, right? And then I said, you know what, I'm gonna do my own channel. I'm gonna create my own digital marketing channel. And I'm gonna give this space to partners to showcase themselves.
Yeah, look, I'll tell you, I love that you did that. And, even though you referenced it as marketing, I still think that there's a lot of education and enablement in there because I've had a chance to check it out, right? And I pinged you and I checked it out. I love the overall presentations of the speakers, the way they communicate, the way they're so effective with their messaging, and also your questions are awesome. So yeah, kudos on the platform.
And by the way, there's one thing super important that I want to make sure it's always there. We try to make that super fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everyone that I'm interviewing say, hey, you know what? That is not a formal interview. We're gonna make fun. We're gonna have jokes. We're gonna laugh together. So that was one of my intentions: is to make it informal, right? And I think it's very similar to your channel. It's not like super production with a lot of like slides flying around, or no. It's a homemade production, fun. And why I think this is super important, Rushan, because that was made firstly for the SMB audience,
Right,
and they need to hear the truth, right?
right.
So by the time you have something too much customized, it kind of like doesn't show up that is being sincere, right? So I try to make this super fun and personal because I want people out there, or partners and customers in SMB, to really understand, hey, this is Guy on his daily life, right? And even with Kevin, again, it was amazing because it was Kevin at his place and we were talking about his life and his experience in other countries as well. It was very human, right? That was one of the goals of Caught by Surprise.
Yeah, very authentic for sure. This is a great place to be with Guy. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate connecting with you. You inspire me. I love your journey. I wish you all the best with the next venture in your life and in your career. I'm sure it'll be a success. And yeah, let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much.